take a little moment. But there we go, we are. We should now be hooked in live on Facebook.
Great.
So welcome Mike Delaney with our technical hitches. I'm saying it for the third time, take 3. And I am honoured to have Mike Delaney on tonight that's going to be speaking about mental health and addiction. And I'm just going to go on my page. So welcome Mike, because I know we're doing it a bit differently and I want to tag you in this so that people on your page are able to see it. So here we go. So post. And there you go. Save. And that's done.
Great.
We're all lived up.
Fantastic. That last
Lovely to see you. And I've been wanting to ask you for a while, how has it been back in Scotland?
It's fantastic, actually. Really, really. I'm loving it. I'm loving being home. It's just kind of, my body has went to a place of peace. I think it was the right decision. It was a strange thing because it was 3 years ago my mother passed, and it was I had a strange grief reaction after that happened. It wasn't a normal how you would grieve someone. It was a bit just a bit strange. I was dissociating and things like that. When I was supposed to be going to work, I would wake up like a couple of hours late and go, my God, I should have been at work, and I had lost a couple of hours. So suddenly one day I just thought, do you know what, I'm going home. And it was never a thought that was ever in my head. And I was quite happy kind of pottering about down in England and doing bits and bobs. So it was interesting because I called my daughter and said, I'm thinking about coming home. And she went, oh my God, Dad, I've seen a house and I can't afford it myself. If you come home, we could buy it together. So it just all kind of fitted together, and we've ended up in quite a big house with a wee bit of land. So we've got chickens and giant rabbits and ducks and everything. It's like old McDonald's farm.
And as the crow flies, you're only probably about 10 mile away from Lanark. As the crow flies.
Yeah. It's not far at all. It's not far.
Not far away. You're not far away at all. And it's funny. I was speaking to Libby this afternoon, and she sends her love. And a very similar story. A mutual friend that we've got is in London, and just phoned her up during the week. Says I'm coming back to Glasgow. It seems as if it's the right decision. And I said that's a wonderful thing for him to be doing, because London's not a place that I would like to be right now.
No, I think the whole political scene has changed. I've always been kind of politically active, Ross, and to the left of centre, and always kind of fighting for rights and things like that. And I think even when I think about my dad, I think he would turn in his grave if he saw what's happened in this country. I think coming back to Scotland for me was about reconnecting with care. People starting to care about each other, and people, our government kind of working for its people rather than for the bankers, which seems to be the thing now in England. It's really tough. And I love England. I've spent the biggest part of my life there, but it's changed. It's the government, it's Westminster, it's not the people. It's a shame. It's a shame. But I think that's also, we're talking about mental health. I think that's also one of the factors that's driving the crisis in mental health is the lack of money, not just for services, but for people's daily living. The people are living on nothing, living on food banks. Poverty is at a level I never dreamt I would see in my lifetime. Starving children, do you know what I mean? And one of the richest countries in the world. So you can see the point of fathers feeling so ashamed of not being able to do what they're conditioned to do as fathers and provide and things like that is a real shame-based thing that becomes very toxic and drives people into depression and suicide and things like that. So it's all connected. Everything's connected. Mm-hmm. There's no just a simple kind of, well, this is how it is. It's really bad. Yeah, that was a nice introduction. How depressing.
Straight in. Well, I did say in one of my many takes, but I was first introduced to yourself in 2006, and I was at university, and I thought I'd make an off the wall when everybody was going, off the wall, Ross, but they were all saying, well, I'm going to do my dissertation on X and Y, and they came, what are you going to do yours on, Ross? And I went, equine assisted psychotherapy.
I don't know.
Yeah. And everybody just went, you're going to do what? And I don't know if we'll have time to talk about this tonight, but I guess a kind of keen interest in Jung and the shamanic mind and how the horse's ability to tune into that unconscious process, that unseen space, and mirror almost perfectly your inner world in the formation of horses. And I thought, right, now that I've said I'm going to do that, how am I going to? Because as part of your dissertation, who are you going to interview? How are you going to interview them? Where are you going to do it? And I was probably, Google would have been in its infancy, and I drove all the way down to Gloucestershire, I think it was, to see you on a rehab that you were running then.
Yeah, steps rehab, yeah, back then.
Yes,
and
that's right.
At that time, there weren't very many of us. There was only a few of us doing it because it was still I'd come from America, so not many people were doing it at that point. We were one of the first in this country to bring it into the addiction world and the mental health world. So it was new then. It's developed a lot since then. Yeah, that's a whole other interview. It's amazing now how far it's come since back then. Yeah. And it's interesting, the shamanic stuff as well.
Sorry?
I'm saying the shamanic stuff as well. I'm clinical director of a purpose-built rehab in Cheshire, and we've introduced shamanic stuff, fire ceremonies, equine-assisted psychotherapy. So we're working with all the main shame, guilt, grief, loss, and doing it differently, doing it through ceremonial letting go exercises. And some of the biggest people that are indulging in it and getting the benefit from it are men, which surprised me. I didn't think men would take to it the way they did, but they've been amazing. And sometimes, at one point, we had about 9 people under 25. I was down there for a 3-month block, and I thought we're going to have trouble, all these young people. They went for it big time. They were right at the fireside, they were reading out their letters, they were crying, they were burning their letters, and then starting to let go and get on with their lives. You know what I mean? It was fabulous. So even the shamanic stuff and the whole ritualistic stuff has got a big part to play now in recovery from mental health and other.
Of course. Of course. And again, that's a whole other conversation and for a whole other time. But that's a bit of a long introduction about how I know you and how I'm familiar with your work. And then we've met at the ICAD conferences in London over the years. And we've been meaning to get together in Falkirk each time I've been through, and it's never happened. And this text message, fancy going live for the start of November, men's mental health. And this morning when I was walking it and I was thinking about this, and this is a question I'm going to ask you in on to let you share your wisdom with people that are viewing. But this morning I was thinking, men's mental health, and it's like a whole month designated to men's mental health in November. And I thought, is that beneficial, or is that spotlight that we're putting on men allowing them to come into the stage or get stage fright? Have we made such a big thing about, I'm going to do the thing I hate, men's mental health, right? That now there's almost, they feel forced that they have to talk about it. They might not be ready. And these were just some lucid thoughts I was having when I was walking the dog this morning. So what's your thoughts on that? How we're approaching men's mental health?
I think there's validity in what you're saying. I think there is the double-sided coin, and I think it's fantastic that we're talking about it, and I think it's fantastic we're given opportunities for men to step forward and talk about it. But I think, as you say, it's hard enough already. There's a huge shame attached to male mental health for some reason. It shouldn't be like that, but it is. And there's even a shame attached to getting help. So standing up and saying, I go to a therapist, you don't see very often. It's not a thing that men talk about. Women tend to talk more about going for therapy. And it's interesting because I was in Harley Street for years, and 99% of my clients were males. So men need the whole therapy side of things, but there's still a stigma attached to admitting it and stepping forward for it. There was a beautiful thing I saw just a few days ago, and I shared it, and it was James O'Brien from LBC, just a few minutes, and he spoke about going to a therapist against his instinct and not expecting it to help. And he said within 5 minutes, the therapist had him in tears and they were talking about boarding school and all the kind of thing that the wealthy elite, the trauma they have to try and manage. And his therapist did inner child work with them, and he described it, and it's so beautifully said. Because inner child work's fantastic work.
Brilliant.
But that's the first time I've ever seen a celebrity actually talking about that. And I shared it thinking this is what people need to understand. Because he described leaving the therapist and he went to the pictures, to the cinema, and he pretended his inner child was sitting next to him. And he watched a science fiction movie and kind of thought about his childhood while he was doing it. So I thought this is the positive stuff that should be getting interviewed and talked about rather than just banging drums, because the whole thing with November and all these things is they're quite big and they're quite in the spotlight. So like you're saying, people tend to step back. If we could do it more quietly all year, where it was just permission was there all the time rather than it being like children, they need bang, 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 and everybody kind of rattles for a month and then it goes back to normal.
Mm-hmm. And the way that we treated Will Smith when he cried on an interview recently, Will Smith cried. It was just used by the media to for entertainment for the masses. And one of the things I was thinking about this morning was the trust, the inner circle of trust, where if you do expose what's going on with you to your mates, that your mates don't carry that story down the pub and then carry it down the story, and before you know it, it's grown arms and legs. And then that's when we do see some unfortunate person wrapped around a tree. And we've all got a part to play in it, and I think we've all got an education. Something you said there as well, though, about therapy or counselling, or indeed people seem to flock to things that don't have the term therapy or counselling. It's like they're quite happy to see a coach, or even, and I'm not demeaning hypnotherapy, because I have a dear friend that studied far harder than I ever did to get a hypnotherapy degree. But somebody that's done a 2-day rapid introduction to hypnotherapy, and people seem to flock to that rather than wanting to do the work that's still a lot of sticking plasters.
You're absolutely right, and it's about that. It's about, especially nowadays, we live in an automatic society. So when you want something, you get it immediately. The payoff's there. People don't want to learn their trade anymore. People like singers and actors, they want to go on the X Factor and be famous overnight. So it's always about being famous. It's never about the journey to becoming famous and learning how to be really good at what you do. It's always about just the instant gratification. And that's what you're saying. It's 2 sessions of hypnotherapy is really easy, because you just go and lie back and listen, and you hope that that's going to work. So it means you don't need to do anything. Do you know what I mean? The thing about therapy is you need to work. Your life isn't going to change unless you get up off your backside and do something to make it change. And that can be simple things. It doesn't need to be a major thing, but just when we talk about depression and anxiety and things like that, if you can start doing simple things that are really dull and boring, but they kind of bring you into the day and they start off your day well, a kind of morning meditation when you wake up, a kind of welcome in the day. I know somebody who every morning writes herself a letter before she starts her day. So she writes and tells herself how wonderful she is and what she's going to do to meet herself in that day. And I think that kind of thing's beautiful. It's we all get into ruts and we all get into low moods, and for years and years I did the same, and I got up every day and went, oh shit, I hate this life, and you just kind of get through it, and it means that life's really horrible when that's happening. Even when there's bad stuff happening around you, I think one of the things for me which changed everything was understanding the power of gratitude, and just being able to say, right, well, I've not got a big house, I've not got a car, I've not got a job at the minute, but actually I'm healthy, I've got food, I've got a roof over my head, I've got people around me that love me. So the kind of basic things for living that we take for granted are actually really special. And lots of people haven't got them. Lots of people would love to have what we hate, the things we want to throw away. So I think there's a lot of damage being done by the way society's changed because people are becoming less important to each other. I think COVID's changing that back slightly. I can feel a shift back into community and people starting to think about each other more than just self all the time. But I think we've got a long way to go.
Mm-hmm. And you struggled with addiction, like
I
also.
did for a long time, yeah.
And you've been over 20 years now, isn't it?
30th September was 24 years. Yeah, 24 years. And that 24 years has been hard work. Do you know what I mean? It's like, yeah, 24 years, but I've lost people. I lost both parents during that time. I've lost two brothers. I've lost jobs. Even before I met you, just after I met you, I left that job. So I had a really good job, well paid, company car, security, but it wasn't enough. I wanted to go out on my own. I wanted to do my thing and kind of see if I could make it outside of being employed by someone else. And in 2008, I set up my company, and the credit crunch happened almost immediately after I set up. So the bank that had promised me everything and all this support, I could hear the drawbridge getting cranked up as soon as I had left, and it went right to the brink. I almost lost my house. I wasn't making enough to survive. But the lesson again, everybody was saying, "You're qualified. You can get a job anywhere." And I was going, "I don't want to get a job. I want to see if I can make this work." And I guess that was the first time in my life that I really needed self-belief. And it came. I finally stuck to my gun, and then it turned a corner and little bits started to come in. And then I got an office in Harley Street and I started doing little bits of different things. Equine took off in a different sense outside of the rehab business. So I was able to do equine privately as well and kind of develop different client groups for that because we were only working with addiction. So taking it into families and young people, I did a whole year working with young people who were sexually traumatized in their families and who had then become sexually harmful. So nobody wanted to work with these kids who were touching other kids. Do you know what I mean? It was like that kind of stuff. And I didn't want to work with them, but it was a children in need funded thing. So I said, let's try it. And it was amazing. It was absolutely amazing. One of the best years I've ever worked. And those kids were fantastic kids. Do you know what I mean? And so misjudged and so, I think, I always say this, one of the things I learned was that they had that initial horrific trauma from people that they trusted. But the trauma they had year upon year after that from professionals was shocking. Kind of transferring them to the other side of the country without any discussion, leaving them in secure residential facilities. It just was awful. The treatment was awful. Whereas if they had actually worked with that trauma initially and kind of held the child in that place and repaired some of the stuff that had happened, because it's that kind of, they started doing it to other children because it happened to them. It's the same cycle. So kind of breaking the cycle in a different way would have been good for those kids because the trauma, some of them were as young as 8 or 9, completely traumatized. And by the people that were supposed to be looking after them. Do you know what I mean? So that's when you get depression and anxiety, but you also get anger and shame and guilt and violence and all that kind of stuff. So working with them was a real turning point in the stuff that the horses were able to do that a human couldn't do because they didn't trust humans anymore. You know what I mean? Humans had hurt them. So they would start telling a horse, knowing that I was standing next to them, they would say to the horse, "Do you know what my dad did to me?" So we had to develop a disclosure policy because so many kids were telling us their stories in the fields, and the staff and the social workers never knew the stories. It was all suspected, and we think this has happened, and we were getting the evidence, and it was the horses that were bringing that out.
Incredible.
It was.
The horses have pulled us into talking about them again.
Well, they have to see what happens, yeah. But again, if we're talking about mental health, it's a thing. Equine assisted psychotherapy is expensive, but I think being with a horse is not expensive. I know people that live in Falkirk. I say horses in that field, go over and visit them. Go over and spend time with them. You don't need a therapist. You can be there, and the energy exchange and the connection with the horse is quite an uplifting experience. So even 10 minutes in a day can make you feel better just being with a horse.
Yep. And I'm smiling inside as I'm talking because, as you said, I came down to speak to you about it in 2006. I'd been interested in it when I heard about it from the States, from a shamanic. At that time in my development, I was full blown into the shamanic mindset, but more from a Jungian perspective. And we're 14 years on from that, and I'm sure there's some people still listening. Oh, what bloody horses are!
Yeah.
And and one day within the next decade, it's going to be a part of all residential care at all levels. I'm almost sure of that. Um, so we're talking about guilt and we're talking about shame, and a lot of what's going on with COVID-19 is bringing a lot of guilt and shame up to the surface because people are feeling inadequate because what gave them strength and purpose, what gave them meaning getting up in the morning and going to work's not there. They're then forced to be with themselves, but they were using the external stimuli of a job or fashion or even what they drove to get to work. They didn't have to do that any longer and they were left sitting with themselves. So what advice could you share with people that are experiencing these kind of things right now? And it's only getting worse because we've got a month of furlough left, I believe, and then it's really going to hit the wall.
It is. I mean, I think in reality, what's coming is going to be like a tidal wave. I think it's already happened once and it's coming back again. And exactly how you describe people's purpose, people's reason for getting up out of bed and functioning is going out to work, earning money, looking after the family. That kind of stuff goes to shit when all this is happening. It just doesn't happen anymore. What I've found, particularly with addictions, is that people who've been married for a long time and they love each other, but actually they don't spend that much time together. They both have their, family systems have their roles. So both people go out and work and they come in, they have their dinner, they talk at night, watch telly. So you get into this kind of routine where sometimes not very much is said. It's just a kind of comfortable routine. And suddenly you're staring at the same person over the table 7 days a week. You have to start communicating. I think communication is the key to most things, but it's that allowing yourself to be vulnerable. I think that's what the struggle is when we talk about male mental health, but I think anybody's mental health. I think the power and vulnerability is so strong that people fight it because we're brought up to believe that vulnerability is wrong, and vulnerability will get you killed and will get you abused and you'll get taken advantage of. And I think it's the opposite. I think particularly males, if males can learn to become vulnerable, it can be such a beautiful part of a personality to just be like that and to just say, I'm sorry, I'm having a really bad day today, I'm struggling. And just if couples and families can learn to be a bit more open with each other and not judge it when it comes, because we get into, again, with relationships and family systems, we get into games and everybody knows it's like a dance and everybody knows the steps of the dance, so nobody has to speak. We just move the way we normally move, and eyebrows raised, someone goes, oh, shut up, and everybody kind of laughs or whatever that little game is. When everybody's stuck together with COVID and restrictions and other things, touch, do you know what I mean? Touch is one of the most important things as human beings that we have, and it's banned. Do you know what I mean? And I think that's hurting a lot of people.
Yeah.
I know I struggle. I'm a huggy. No, I mean, people go, oh my God, I've not seen you for ages in a hug. And it's really difficult to contain your arms and to stand and you feel as if you're hurting someone's feelings by not showing your love for them. So I struggle with that as well. And I think a lot of people do, but they don't like saying that. You know, they don't like saying, oh, I'm huggy or whatever. There's a thing at one point, and I had a Harley Street clinic, and at one point I coined the phrase Central Scotland syndrome because I was getting a lot of Scottish people who were coming to me because I was Scottish, and it was the same set of symptoms, and most of them were from around this area, from the kind of central region around Glasgow, Edinburgh, and And it was that low self-esteem, no feeling good enough, no feeling able to say positive things about themselves because, like me, we were brought up to think that that was bald-headed, that was big-headed, and you never did that. You were kind of humble, and you never spoke about yourself positively, particularly when you're brought up in a faith background, which I was. So the shame was shoveled on you. You know, the shame was the tool that teachers and family use to keep you in your place. So it's difficult and it's hard work to release and let go of that shame because it's inbred, it's kind of embedded in you, and you don't know what it is. You just behave in certain ways, and it's driven by shame. And it's that kind of just no feeling like everybody else, comparing yourself, looking at somebody and going, I wish I could be like that. And actually, you are like that. You just don't believe it.
Yes.
And believing in your own power to actually change things and make a difference in your life and in other people's lives can be a major thing. To self-esteem comes from inside. You know what I mean? It's not a thing that you can buy a nice car, you can have a nice house, you can show off all day long. I also have worked over the years with a number of celebrities who've got everything, but they've not got that. They've not got self-esteem. They've not got self-belief. They're actually very lonely, very insecure people, and the kind of the adulation and the fame is their drug. They need that to feel like everybody else. And the minutes that's not there, and at this point as well, the theatres are closed. Nobody's making films. Nothing's getting done. Musicians aren't out playing their gigs anymore, so they're not getting all that either. Apart from not having money, they're getting kind of neglected. The arts are getting badly neglected. I know that some theatres have got some money, but generally it's a sad state of affairs because we all need that as well as everything else. We need music, we need entertainment, we need laughter, all these kind of things. The theatres are shut and nothing's happening, everything's still silent. And those guys are getting no money, they're struggling the same as everybody else, but they're also not getting the audience. And a lot of these guys need that audience to keep them alive. It's what feeds their soul.
So could that adulation be, as you said, that adulation was their drug, but could that adulation be almost an illusionary sense of connection because the disconnection is so deep within them that they only feel connected when there's an illusionary sense of that that's met through the clapping or indeed the adulation of the audience?
For some people, yeah. I know a lot of people, and I know a lot of people because they came into therapy. So a lot of entertainers are in therapy. They're understanding. Actors, particularly, actors depend on being able to be vulnerable, being able to pull on their own emotions and their own life experience to play certain roles. So they're more comfortable with self and who they are. They're more comfortable with their darker side and kind of embracing their darker side as a part of themselves. It's that thing about being good. You've got to be good. Oh, you're a good boy. Oh, you're a bad boy. That kind of thing. So we take anything that's seen as bad shamefully. Whereas actually, there's parts of my personality that aren't very nice, but they're part of me, and I have to live with them, and I have to manage them, and I have to accept them. I can't hide the parts of myself I don't like very much. I just have to manage them in a better way, and be open about them and say, I'm sorry, I can't do that because I get really angry when this happens. You know what I mean? And kind of share your experience. I think the more open you can be with other people, the more open they are back to you. And you probably get that kind of feedback. I get that feedback when I talk. They say, oh my God, I never thought about that because nobody talks about that or nobody says that type of thing. Whereas I talk about anything, I don't care anymore. I've had that much therapy, I've got no shame left.
It's just the dark nights are starting to draw in, and it's not that I'm majorly concerned or worried. I'm not, but we're in a kind of time where people aren't able to make plans. It was like, I'm wanting to go hiking at the weekend in Ben Nevis, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to do that. And that's my little little third world problem for the day. But a lot of people aren't able to make plans provisionally for, is there going to be a wage next week? Is there going to be a furlough money next week? Is there going to be, and people seem, and again, I might be off with this, but we're talking about addiction. People seem to be masking that right now with a lot of consumption of alcohol. And friends do say to me, "Oh, Ross, you're just primed for that because you're sober." But when I go to Tesco's, I do my shopping daily, and when I go daily, I've just got this radar where I look into folks' trolleys because I'm a right nosy, But it was like, and generally there's the same sort of people going into Tesco's at the same kind of time of night. They're maybe just getting off the train or they're just finishing their work or whatever. And I'm noticing they've got a bottle of wine in their trolley again. And these are strangers. These aren't the people I know. But I walk about Tesco's playing a game with myself. Who's got wine in their basket?
It's true. And, 3 months in Delaney, and it's just opened in March. So it's in the early stages. It was busy. And what shocked me was that probably 75% of people that came in while I was there said I was okay until COVID. And it was that, like you said earlier, they had a job, they had a routine, they went to the pub after work and had a few pints, they went home, their dinner was there. So that they were able to contain their addictive behaviour because they had to work the next day. I did that for years. I held a job doing and drunk the night before and drunk too much and had a hangover and all that. But the minute lockdown started and furlough started, even company directors who kind of functioned at quite a high level had no job to go to. One of the guys I saw coming in, I've never seen in all my years anybody shaking like that. He couldn't, he was physically like that. And he had, for years and years, he had went to the pub, had maybe 5 or 6 pints, went home. Sunday lunchtime, there was a session, but he never missed work. He functioned. He said he knew he drank too much, but it never affected him. But the minute furlough happened, he started drinking gin. He started trying spirits that he would never have done before. And within 4 or 6 weeks, he was done, completely done, where he couldn't even pick a cup up. It took days to get his shaking kind of anywhere reasonably under control. So there was lots of people. I was shocked at the amount of assessments that said I was okay till COVID. Lockdown caused me to drink. So there's a lot of people out there, and we all know that function despite drinking far too much. But the minute COVID happens, there's no break, and they cross that invisible line that you can't get back from. I think there's an invisible line at a certain point where you just go, oh my God, this is I can't stop this. And a lot of people have crossed it over the past 6 months, and a lot more are just about to, because they've managed this far, and now it's going to happen again. It's really scary. And that's no thinking about people who've already got mental health problems, who've not got services. The amount of people that are phoning me at the minute, and I haven't got appointments, they're phoning me saying, please, can you see me? I can't. They tried to kill themselves, but they can't get an appointment for 6 months to see someone. There's going to be a lot of dead people, and there's not enough services out there to cope with what's happening. It's that what we're talking about not getting dealt with leads to that despair that says, I need to get out of here, I'm killing myself. I can't do this anymore. Because I've been to that place. I know that darkness. I know that absolute despair where you don't believe there's a solution. Where you sit down and you think, I've tried everything. I need to go. I can't do this. And I get that feeling because I've had it and I've acted on it in the past. And I know it's a brain disorder. I think when people speak to me, I go, see, tomorrow that might change. You don't think so right now, but tomorrow your thought. You just need a little bit more endorphin for that to shift a bit and to think about it slightly differently. And don't make a decision when you're feeling like this. Think about it. And it's difficult because when you don't believe it when you're there, but most people who get there, like myself, never ask for help. I never asked a solitary soul for help in my life until I wouldn't die, because I was trying to kill myself and nothing was working. And it was the despair of not being able to die that made me pick up the phone and say, I need some help, because I was at that place. And that place is very frightening. But if you get there and you've not had any support up to that point, you don't believe there's any support. But there is. There is support. It's no. I was talking to someone the other day, because I trained initially in Ladbert Hospital. I worked in Ladbert for years before I moved to England, and they suddenly became toxic. Big hospitals were terrible, and there was a lot of things about them that weren't great. But the one thing about them was they always had beds. And when you were working on a ward and you got to know your patients that were back out at home, they just picked up the phone and used to say, Mike, I'm feeling a bit iffy, can I come in? And you would make it, they would be in that night, they would be in a bed, they'd be looked after, they'd be seen by a psychiatrist, re-prescribed or re-stabilised or whatever, and then back out. There's nothing now. There's nothing at all for all these people.
So what's the answer? What is the answer?
I think we need to start again. I think mental health is finished at the minute. It's been so destroyed. There's nothing left. And I was in the NHS at the time when it was starting to be, the hospitals were being closed down, and I was all for them closing as well. But I was a trade unionist back then. I was in COSI, as it was called. I think it's Unison now. And I was saying, you can't close these places until you've got other places suitable for people who have struggles and need to come in. Respite care centres, smaller units for people that can't move out. Some people aren't able to live in the community. They just aren't. And I believe that. The people that went out who can't live in the community are now in prison. The prison is full. Prisons are full of people who should be in hospital.
Of course.
You know I mean? It's awful.
Absolutely.
That's what the hospitals did. It just made the prisons bigger. And there's nurses now in all the prisons going around dishing out psychiatric medications. Whereas at least when they were in hospitals, there was a bit of love went along with it. There was a bit of freedom. They could go about the grounds. They could go out into the town. They could do what they wanted, really. Whereas there's no that anymore. So I think, see if we could get some investment and have a small hospitals. Doesn't need to be huge hospitals. The private sector's got them at the minute. So if you're lucky, you can get into some of the private hospitals, but they're usually for more secure services, adolescents, things like that, people who are really violent. But if we had some of the good things from the old hospitals brought into a modern kind of complex where there was less rigid, uniformed kind of services, but more of a, come in this afternoon, you can stay in for 2 weeks, we'll restabilize you, we'll send you out. That kind of, like there's something there for everybody. There's an emergency bolt hole where somebody can get help. Because even for years I was in London working, and at night I would be going back to my hotel, stepping over bodies who were sleeping on the roads and in the shop doorways and things. And I've been a nurse for 40 odd years. I knew every time the noise they make, the way they speak to you, mental health, PTSD. You're walking along diagnosing all these people on the street that should be getting looked after.
Of course. We intervene with them as children when they're abused or they're damaged, and then we let them go. And then the police come in and intervene when they're being abused, offer them some kind of protection. They don't get their needs met. And then 10 or 15 years down the line, the police are actually incarcerating them for the crime that they've created because of their childhood. How's that working?
It's the same way in PTSD. We have wars. We recruit thousands of young men. We teach them how to kill really well. We send them abroad to kill people. They come back. They've got PTSD. They get chucked out of their house and they're homeless. The streets of London. My sister used to be a social worker in a hostel in Bethnal Green, which went, I think, from 20 beds to 56 after Afghanistan. 90% of them PTSD. I used to go in and do some training on PTSD and working with guys like this because it was just a hostel. They weren't trained mental health staff. And some lovely people, young, some of them like 20, 21 years old, homeless because if families couldn't cope. If someone slammed the door, there was all hell. They were strangling people. And then by the same token, I had meetings with the Ministry of Defence at one point about equine, and they won't acknowledge PTSD. They won't acknowledge its existence, technically, because then they would need to pay for services because it would be their fault. You know what I mean?
Then they would need to own up to the responsibility that they created it, which is very clear. Which is very clear to see. And I've got friends that are up in Haida which is Haida is about 60 miles off of Alaska, up in British Columbia, and I spent a lot of time up in the west coast of Canada. And you look at what's going on with them First Nations, Native Americans, and the genocide and abuse and sexual abuse and alcoholism that's going on within their communities. And I still keep in touch with them. And you go and look that their fishing rights have been stripped away from them, their hunting rights, their spiritual rights. And it's like, is it any wonder what's going on with their mental health when the government took all this stuff away from them? But wait a minute, if we acknowledge that, then somewhere we need to pay for a service that we created by taking away your spiritual rights and your fishing rights.
Yeah, absolutely.
Same thing here.
Australia's the same with Aborigines. It's all these kind of genocides that happen when people invade other countries or people discover, as our history books uses the word, discover countries. They slaughter people and it's okay. And then they tie them. I mean, until 1960 something, Aborigines were classed as plants, flowers and fauna. They weren't classed as human. So it's that kind of, this country in a much lesser sense is on that road. It has been for some time. It's been this kind of dehumanization and speaking about people as cockroaches and immigrants as cockroaches, all that kind of stuff's bad. Bad. And
it's getting allowed. It's been allowed.
It is. It's been encouraged. It allows politicians from the far right to step in, pretending they've got the answers to everybody's anger, because it's about all these things create anger in people because they blame people. They go, you'd be okay if it wasn't for these East Europeans coming in or this one coming in and stealing your jobs. Makes me die because half the people wouldn't work anyway. They wouldn't do the jobs that have been done by these people. It's like, oh my God. But that's where we are. And it's been one of those things for me who in the 70s and 80s, I was marching in the Anti-Nazi League and this one and that one. And everything was kind of moving forward and getting places all through the 80s, the 90s, it all started going to hell. I think the minute we got to the millennium, it was like everything started changing. But the past 10 years have put the tin hat on everything. I think what happened, and this might sound a bit crazy, but I think the minute they got back in 2010, they just carried on Thatcher's plan in lots of ways and did things that she wasn't able to do and took it a step further. Because back then, she wouldn't have got away. There was trade unions and things back then. There was controls to stop people abusing. I mean, nowadays, 0-hour contract, I can't believe that we allowed all that to happen, to kind of take away people's rights.
They've got no rights.
Yeah, they've got no rights. No.
Zero. And it's getting
they tell those people that they're middle class and they make them hate cleaners. You know what I mean? I saw a documentary about a year ago and it was about a call centre and these people were on minimum wage, 0-hour contracts, but they were convinced that they were middle class and they were convinced that they were better off than East European cleaners who were going in at night and cleaning their offices. You know what I mean? It's like this kind of ability to divide and polarize and get, and the way the internet's working now, where they can target and do that, again, destructive. Everything like this is very destructive. And it ultimately ends up with the man who's got no money or the woman who's got no money looking at their family, looking at their house and thinking, how can I go on like this? What's going to happen? How can I feed my kids? Do you know what I mean? I can't imagine what it feels like for my grandson to climb up on me and say, "Grandpa, I'm hungry." No, that makes me get upset. People
So much
everywhere.
polarization. There's such polarity and polarization going on, and at every level. And
Yeah.
and there's actually in Lanark, there's a food bank in Lanark through the church that I'm part of,
Right.
and there's actually people that have got relatively, again in inverted commas, good jobs
Yeah.
that are working and they're using food banks to feed their families.
Yeah, it's just unbelievable. And I mean, obviously, I'm in private practice. I've got clients that I see who can afford to come and see me. I do other stuff as well, but even the ones that come to see me are struggling, and they've got money, but like everybody else, they don't know how long it's going to last. They don't know if they're going to have a job at the end of this year. Christmas is a big thing at the minute. It's getting closer and closer. Lots of people panicking about that whole thing. And again, you talk about shame. Getting up on Christmas morning and your kids not having presents must be the worst feeling in the world. You know what I mean? And that kind of depression is an automatic kind of result of that. How can you not be depressed when that's happening? I used to look at people on the street when I was walking back to my hotel, and I would look at them, and sometimes I'd give them money, and people would go, "Gee, they just buy drugs." And I go, "If I was in the street, I'd buy drugs." I might be in recovery now. I'm in recovery now because I've did what I did, and I've got a job, and I'm working, and I'm comfortable. But if something happened and I was on the street, the first thing I would do would be go to a dealer, because I couldn't lie in a shop doorway and go to sleep. You know what I mean? I would need a drug to do that. And I see them lying, and I think there's no any other way out unless somebody says, "Come with me, we're going to help you." What's the escape from that? You know what I mean? How do you come back from that? Lying in a doorway. Do you know in early recovery, I went to a place in Western-super-Mare called Broadway Lodge, and they had a counsellor there, and she actually got a degree. She had been homeless. She got a degree. She had a best-selling book called A Pavement for My Pillow. I can't remember her name off the top of my head, but she became well known. She got a degree at Liverpool University, and she did television programs and things. But I met her one night, and we had a chat about. I was fascinated because she lived on the streets in London, and she had a girlfriend that had been together for years, and her girlfriend had been a ballet dancer. And she spoke about homelessness. I mean, we're talking 25 years ago. She spoke about it as romantic, and that's how she got through it. She reframed it in her head all the time. So when she was in a shop doorway with her girlfriend at her side, she said, "I felt happy that we were together, and I would look up at the moon and pretend we were at the side of the sea or at the side of a river or something like that." And that's how they kind of got through it. And they were drinking as well, don't get me wrong. But her girlfriend died on the street, so she was left on her own, and things got a lot worse. And I said to her, what was the final straw that made you go to rehab? How did you get into rehab? And this is it. I'll never forget this. She said, "I was lying in a shop doorway in Oxford Street, and I woke up because a policeman was pissing on me." And that was her final straw. She said, "I can't take this anymore. If I'm that worthless, that the official people that are supposed to be looking after me care so little for me." So she went in and changed everything. You know how everybody's bottom's different, and her bottom was that moment. And that's horrific. That's horrific. But so many people, I mean, millions of people across this country at the minute are in a terrible mess. Terrible. How they're coping. Domestic violence is another thing. Sorry about that.
That's all right. As you said there about people think they're gravitating towards rock bottom, but if we don't get the appropriate and effective help that could be available out of the limited services that are out, we're going to realise very quickly that there's a basement to our ground zero and beyond. But somebody's trying to get you, and I've took up massive amounts of your time tonight. I could just chip and chaff away with you forever. And Auntie Libby said she's going to put a meal on for us when we're allowed. So
I look forward to that, Libby MacArthur. I hope you're watching.
Aye, I drove by her house yesterday. I was in Glasgow yesterday, and I drove past and I sat in, I'm not going to say the name of her street, and I looked up, there she was. And I beeped the horn, and she looked through, and we were blowing each other kisses and giving each other virtual hugs. And whenever we went in, like I was in the car in the street, and she was up there swaddling away, so she was there. We managed to we got a wee bit of time together on the phone today, and I was telling her that we were coming on. She says, "Oh, I'll be watching tonight." So she's in there. She's doing great, and she's getting on great with her celebrant. Saying she's got some funerals, and she's
fantastic. Yeah. You know, I met her through Anne Mitchell because I was friends with Anne Mitchell in London,
right.
And I didn't know at that time that Anne had for years had spent time at the Citizens Theatre. So her and Libby were really good friends from way back in the day before any of them were famous. And they kind of do childcare for each other and things like that because both of them were single parents, I think, at that time. So it was lovely to come back to Scotland and already know her and be able to continue that relationship.
Well, hopefully we'll get a wee bite to eat round our table in the body of the Kirk in Glasgow. We'll get a wee bite to eat. Thank you so much for your time, and I'm sure that people will have got some wee nuggets out of that. And now, if people are interested, or where can they get a hold of you? MikeDelaney.co.uk.
MikeDelaney.co.uk. Yeah, I've just in January I formed a CIC called Equi Scotia as well with Julianne Griffith. So we've just got the rubber stamp from SQA, Scottish Qualification Authority. So we've got a new Scottish qualification in equine that starts very soon.
Okay.
And it's recognised internationally because it's SQA. So I think we'll be able to do some travelling as well.
So saying that, for the equine assisted psychotherapy stuff that we didn't really go into, but we did, it's Equiscotia.
Equiscotia.com. Equi-Scotia.
Equi-Scotia. So if anybody that's listening is interested in equine assisted psychotherapy, it's absolutely fantastic. I haven't done it myself, but I was very interested in it because of the power of the Mustang and how they can tune in and just play court, which is very family constellation therapy, very shamanic mindset stuff, and it was all stuff that I was very interested in decades ago. And I'd encourage you to have a look about it. So it's Mike Delaney and Equine Assisted Psychotherapy, equiscotia.com or mikedelaney.co.uk. So thank you very much for your time, and I hope to see you in Glasgow soon, sir.